Welcome. Today we are doing a type 6 Enneagram panel. And so I am joined by some wonderful people who identify with the type 6 personality structure. And first of all, I just want to thank all of you for participating. I know you don't yet know exactly what you got yourself into, but thank you for trusting me enough to say yes. And to go on this little adventure for about an hour. Well, we will be talking about what it's like to live and think and love and be as a type 6. My name is Mickey Scott Bay Jones, and I use she, her pronouns. And so I will be your host and facilitator for this type panel. I'm a trained and certified Enneagram teacher and coach. And panels are a way that we, in the narrative tradition, learn about the 9 types. I can sit up here as a teacher and tell you all day long about each type, but there is something really special about when people tell their own stories. And so hence you have narrative or story, and the narrative tradition really heavily relies on people telling their own experience of what it's like to be their type. I am going to offer just a little bit of kind of a profile of type 6. And again, that's just my understanding. And then that will really be filled out by each of you and your stories and what you share. So first of all, the type 6 is often called the loyal skeptic, or the loyalist, or the questioner. And this personality type structure is often motivated to seek safety by preparing for possible harm or challenges. The motivation of the type 6 can also be understood as a motivation to anticipate possible harm. They are usually experts in worst case scenario thinking. Their attention is focused on kind of what are all the potential threats. I think of a 6 that I know and love really dearly, a sister friend of mine who, she always sits so she can see the door of a restaurant or a room or whatever, like always kind of understanding what the potential threats could be. And they're vigilant, scanning, doubting, and usually have a core strategy of either confronting or hiding from what they fear. Our type 6 friends are prepared. I always say, if you're going to be in an apocalypse, make sure you have a 6 around, because they are going to have either the materials or the knowledge or know who to go to. They're going to be prepared in some way. They are highly skilled thinkers. And sensitive to things that could have a double meaning, and often concerned with power and authority. So while 6s can deal with doubt and be hypervigilant and have difficulty with authority, either being kind of too submissive to authority or ultra oppositional, their strengths really draw people to them. Type 6 are experienced as really warm, protective, the definition of loyal, someone who is going to be with you to the end, and super attentive to the problems of other people. They are often very involved and dependable, like with their family or with their community. They are always going to be there. They are intuitive, sensitive, witty. I don't know if you all consider yourself all these things, but this is often what people will say about 6s. And this has been my experience with you all as well. Usually full of ideas, but also strategic with those ideas, thoughtful, full of serious questions, and really focused on fairness. As 6s do work to explore and relax their type structure, what we find is that they have more room for trust. And not even trust so much as faith, right? It's more developed than just a simple ability to trust, but it's a faith in people or things or ideas. or movements. And they are able to more deeply touch into their courage in the midst of doubt. The doubt and fear doesn't go away, but there's a deep courage that resides in the inner self of the six. And they're able to integrate the wisdom of the body and mind instead of kind of trying to keep them separated. At their best, type sixes offer the world the gifts of courage in the face of fear, a preparedness for the uncertainty of the world, and powerful questions in times of discernment. So we all experience, some of these traits of type six, but the panelists here today know what it's like to experience this as their dominant type. So let's take a moment to kind of feel into who we are. And we're just gonna, take a moment to collect our breath. And when we're done with that, I have some questions for you all. So you can join me in whatever way feels good to you. I'm closing my eyes, kind of sitting back in my chair. Oh, being partway through the day, I need a moment to take some deep breaths. So I invite you to join me wherever your breath is right now. No judgment or assessment. Just knowing that we bring our full selves, our experiences, our wisdom that resides deep within our bodies, our minds, and our hearts to this conversation. And on your next out breath, you can open your eyes and rejoin us all in this space. Thank you. All right. So let's get into this. So my lovely, courageous type six, how did you know that you were a type six? What was it about the descriptions you read, or maybe other sixes you talked to, or even in what I just talked about here about type six? What resonated with you that made you go, yep, that's the type I have? Anyone can go first. So, or else I'll just call on someone.
I'll jump in, Tamara. Okay. Her pronouns. I would say it was, really the descriptor of being loyal, because early on in my 20s, when I was first kind of introduced to Enneagram, I was certainly caught in patterns of being loyal to a fault, like where it really took almost getting kicked out of situations or things like that long after it wasn't probably good for me to be still hanging around, but or the kind of dating relationships, being loyal to someone that just really hard to see moving on.
Yeah, that intense loyalty, that can be kind of, it's something that people are drawn to and feels really good. And it can feel like something that kind of traps you at times. That does seem to be a key characteristic for type sixes. Who else?
I'll go. I remember as a kid, I asked my mom to make up the bed the opposite way of where your head should go, so that my eyes would always have like perspective of the door, in case there was an intruder, and we didn't live in an unsafe area. But I always wanted to be prepared as a kid. And I just was always like, my friends didn't do that. Like, what's going on with that? So that was just kind of the first memory. And I don't know if we're going to talk about nature versus nurture and how you get your Enneagram type, but that was an early memory of kind of where I think it was kind of resonating with me.
Yeah, sometimes we can know and see those things from pretty early on. It's probably kind of beyond the scope of what we'll get to today, but we know that kind of personality structure is what grows up around your true inner self, as a way of kind of learning to deal with the world. And it doesn't have to be something kind of real that did it to you, right? Because sometimes we hear about like a childhood wound, right? Or relationship with parents. And there are things we perceive that don't have to necessarily be, this deeply physical thing that happened to us. But our brains are navigating that, right? And developing who we are. And so absolutely those childhood things, whatever it was, can help develop into those strategies of protection, So it's interesting that you even remember it far back into your childhood. Some of us have those memories and some of us don't, but it's helpful even to know as you begin to unpack your personality type that like, oh, this has been something that's been around for a long time. And it's not good or bad. It's just a strategy that my brain developed. It's part of how I grew into being able to navigate the world. So.
I originally thought I was a 1. And I don't remember what led to that, but I was at an Enneagram workshop and was listening to things about other types. And the cue to me that I needed to learn more about 6s was the difference between 1s having an inner critic and 6s having an inner committee of critics. And I was like, that's it. There's a whole committee of them inside. It's not just 1. So lots of other bits about the 6 made sense after that, but that was kind of the key thing of like, oh my, I have to learn more about this. I didn't know this was a thing. And it just made so much more sense to me than the idea of there being one critic that was helping me aim towards some kind of perfect self, which is kind of my understanding of 1s. So that was what helped me understand it.
Okay, I saw a lot of resonance going on with this. Yeah, so please jump in.
Well, I was like, I'm glad I'm not the only one who has to say I thought I was a 1. The whole time until about 2 years ago, was it even 2 years ago? Maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, where I was like, I retook, I had done the test in so many different ways, but I finally took it with like the Enneagram Institute, and they came back like saying some foolishness, some number that I was like, oh, I'm not that number. I was like, well, let me look at the other top numbers. And then 6 stood out. And when I read that summary, I don't know what it was I know what it was. My mother's a 1, and we have a very intense, we used to have a very enmeshed relationship. And she was always all about safety, but from very different motivations than I am. And I think I over-identified with her a lot. And so I thought it was a 1. But then when I found out she was a 1, and then I was like, well, maybe I can't be the same thing as you. Anyways, and so when I finally took the test again, and they were like, oh, 6 came up, and I read the descriptions and pretty much laying out my entire like life experience around the inner critics, the panel, and also like the ways I experience relationships so intensely around loyalty. I was like, oh, how did I not? I had a little, some people on this call know I had a little mini identity crisis, but I came out the other side much better because I was equipped to actually validate what I was experiencing instead of thinking I was like a faulty 1. I was like, I don't even know how to do be a 1 the right way. And then I was like, oh wait, because I'm not a 1, so that's why this is not working. So it was really helpful.
Okay, well, so what's interesting is that we have things called lookalike types in the study of the Enneagram, and 6 and 1 are considered lookalike types. And there's a lot of resonance between 6s and 1s. And of course, also you brought up the, enmeshment with parents that can totally, like, I'm actually super reluctant to land on a type for my oldest child because being her mother, and I was working through so much of my own stuff when she was little. I'm like, I don't know how much is me seeing myself in her and vice versa, right? So all of these factors actually are part of this. And it's actually kind of interesting for you all as, thinking types, that it's clear you've done a lot of thinking around even your type, right? Not every number even does that. Some people just read a description, they're like, sure, that's me, don't need to do any other research. And what I'm hearing is even this like ability to make these connections, and having done some deep thinking around it, even that kind of shows off your type structure. And I'll be interested to see if this kind of committee of inner critics comes back up, because I don't know that I've heard that before, and it's really a helpful kind of delineation between 6 and 1. And I'm really interested in that and what that looks like for you. Is there anybody who would kind of elaborate more, if you have some more on kind of hearing it as a committee or a panel?
Well, I kind of think of it as like it's something that just is so familiar to me, but like at the times, if I actually let it flow out, like if I let that thinking process flow out and somebody's actually hearing it, like my husband, it can get overwhelming really fast, because I can go through seeing like, oh, but this, but this, but this, but this. I think it's also, I feel like I've come to understand it as a way it's connected to the 9 part a little bit, because it's able to see so many different perspectives at once, but sometimes it's first coming from the fear part, or the, but sometimes it's also just showing up of like thinking through all these possibilities, of the way things can go, or like could come like with packing and travel. It's really hard to pack economically, because like it's like, oh, but what if this is, and because of that way of thinking, like I will usually have what somebody else needs, even if I end up not needing it. So, but it's whatever that part of the committee, I see it as being all of that, whether it's the critic or the things that are all the voices that are coming up to say, like raising their hand and saying like, oh, but don't forget about this. And, what about that? And you might want to think about this. And that's how I experience it. And it can be really overwhelming if that free flow of thought, like I actually narrate it out loud and somebody's, they're like, whoa, all of that.
And it's interesting too, I wonder if maybe some of the nuance is that not all of the voices are critical, versus I would say with a 1, it tends to be a strong critical voice, versus, oh, maybe you should pack this, or, like almost like helpers. Like voices trying to help you make sure you don't forget anything, so I love it. Super interesting. We're already getting some really good gems here. So this has already come up a little bit, because we're talking about the things you do that could be considered strengths or could be considered challenges, but I want to talk just about the strengths for a moment. What do you think are some of the strengths or gifts of your type?
Well, I know for me, like I'm people's boss. And so I will come into the space, and even if I have a task I want to complete, I'm able to notice environmentally what's going on and what people are missing or what they're needing or what support. And I can give it really easily on the spot in real time. And I know that has made me like a lot more like out of the team of bosses, like people talk about me being like really present. They feel really connected to me and they feel like they can trust me, right? And so because I've built that rapport, when I know there's whole books about like how to build trust as a leader, and I'm like, you just do it. Like you just build a trust and rapport. It's not just be trustworthy. It seems so simple, but apparently it's not always that simple or intuitive for everybody, because they're not fixes. So I do think for me, it's been helpful in being a leader that can like really be responsive and see what's going on and bring up practical solutions and offer solutions for people, like various solutions to figure out how to get what they need. So I don't know how you would encapsulate that in one word.
Yeah, no, yes, that is a strength that is beyond one word, that you can, it's not always seeing problems. I mean, that's part of it, but you are really able to kind of make some assessments quickly, and then act on those assessments. What else is a strength of our type 6 folks?
I think kind of like what Chantelle was saying, there's a depth maybe to 6s which contributes to their trustworthiness. But like, I don't like small talk because I don't trust it. So I think for me, and this also gets into the loyalty piece, like when you're talking to me, I think you'll see my depth, and which will lead you to quicker trust me and know I'm not blowing smoke. And then that trust develops into like a loyal like teammate, where I'm not flattering myself because we're all in the same company, but just that I might be someone to call when there's something beyond a problem which requires small talk, if that makes sense. So there's just a depth, I think, that she was alluding to.
Thank you for that, Zoe. Yeah, I'm wondering about the interplay between trust, because often the 6s are described as not quick to trust other people, doubting other people. But as you were talking about that, I kind of sensed a knowing of yourself, Zoe, that you feel like you're a trustworthy person, and that you're pretty quickly, people are trusting you. They're seeing that you're a person of depth. So what is it that you think allows you to be a person that people trust, but maybe you have, like, you don't trust the small talk, but people are trusting you in the small talk, right? So what is that allows people to trust you, but maybe you're not able to offer that trust as quickly?
I think perhaps, and again, I haven't contemplated all of that. It's a very good question, right? Like, but I would say I ask questions and I listen well. Maybe to understand versus to quickly give my advice. I don't know. I just feel, I don't know.
A red flag for me is if I demonstrate trustworthiness or trust behavior that you could put some trust in, but you're not able to reciprocate. So the moment that you're not able to reciprocate, I'm like, oh, well, yeah, no, there's no way. And it never enters my mind that maybe this person doesn't even like understand that as an indicator of trustworthiness, or has different trust values than me. Like that, I would never even entertain that. I'd be like, oh, this person is ready to show me they're not trustworthy. And I am gauging, like the jury is out for a long time on whether, like, are you going to be deserving of my loyalty is really part of my question. And part of the deserving of the loyalty is the need for reciprocity, at least for me. So until I can see demonstrated reciprocity, I have learned to be less trusting. I grew up definitely being told, like, don't even worry about not trusting people. You have to trust people. And to my own detriment, I think so.
So maybe there's some, you're kind of throwing something out there, like it's part of your process of gathering information and maybe even testing other people by the way you demonstrate what it means to be loyal or trustworthy. Wonder if that's part of it.
Yeah, I really am relating to both of the things that you're saying and noticing, like, I mean, I'm a therapist in my work. And so like being able to ask people questions, and that goes outside of my work too, but that's what I hear from people is like, they feel like I ask really good questions, or that's engaging to them, or that makes people feel good, right? Because I'm curious about them, but I'm not going to as easily just offer up things about me. And the reality is a lot of people don't know how to ask those kind of questions back, or they're in a different focus space. And so, you know, in more casual situations, like it can feel really unfulfilling, you know, because like I could be engaged the whole time at a party, but leave like nobody took the time to get to know me, kind of thing. And I probably helped co-create that because I also can feel more comfortable, keep asking the questions of other people, so there's that's a tool to also not have to go there. But noticing a lot of people don't know how to reciprocate resonated.
Yeah. I really kind of I felt that a little bit in my chest when you were like, but nobody takes the time to get to know me, because I've had that feeling, I feel like, in my life. So what does it feel like when you feel like you can trust someone with your inner self, where they are demonstrating those things for you?
Feels like magic.
What immediately came to mind was like all these managers melting away.
You can relax.
Mm.
Which feels like magic.
Yeah, and you can be like your most authentic self, for sure. Like for me, that person is my husband. And so I feel like I don't have to watch what I say. I don't have to filter. This is me. And I can rest. I can rest in me and not scan the room, not filter my words, not, be hypervigilant. I can just be as purely me as I was created to be.
That sounds really lovely. Gaelyn, what are you thinking about strengths?
Well, I was thinking particularly in reaction to what y'all just said about being with people who get you. And the thing that came to mind when Zoie was speaking was, and my wife and I had never talked about this, but we went out to dinner one time, and she rearranged how we came in to sit down. And she was like, well, I know you want that chair because you always sit facing that way. And I was like, but we've never talked about that. And we hadn't. And she's like, well, no, but I just know that's what you do. And it was kind of like that. Oh, and you're not judging it. It's just, that's what you do. That's what makes you comfortable, so that we can sit here and enjoy each other's company without you doing this the whole meal, which I would be. Yeah. I want to say that trusting people is easy, but it's not. I think I do that. I have a period where I'm kind of checking it out. And there's definitely people who are immediately in the category of like, not safe, never going to happen. I don't know if this is something others experience. I'm assuming I'm not alone, but for me, once you break that trust, that's it, done. I have no time. And I haven't come across that in my work. I'm an Episcopal priest, so thankfully I haven't, but at some point that's going to come up and it's going to be a work hazard. But I know that like in personal relationships, when people have, cheated or done something behind my back, I don't come back and be in relationship with that person. I see some head like, oh yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I feel that. And Gaelyn, so let me ask you, which may be a tender question, what happens when someone can't trust you, or you know what I'm saying? Like, we let people down every day, or, often in big and small ways, right? Like it's going to happen because we're human.
Right.
And what's that like for you, or what happens in you when you feel that from someone, like that they have that sense that you have, towards somebody when they break your trust?
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of inner voices about that, because I have a pretty high standard for myself. Yeah. They're not kind inner voices. They're not the helpful ones probably, but yeah, I have a lot of inner talk about that.
Yeah, it can even be a small thing. Like if I let somebody that I love down, that I like really need to count on, I just like, I can't handle it for very long. I go to my partner all the time right away and I'm like, okay, so I'm sorry, I did that thing. I just need it to be right because I'm so sorry. And like, even if I'm not 100% aware of what so they're the first person to slow me down and be like, what are you sorry about? And I had to think like, well, why am I sorry? And why do I feel so much anxiety around needing to make things right because I let them down? And it was back to this whole thing of like, I want you to know that I'm trustworthy because I really need you to be trustworthy because that makes me feel safer. And so I needed somebody to slow me down to help me unpack that. That's a lot to handle somebody to carry. Like, so yeah.
Yeah.
Those the committee's beating the shit out of you when you're like,
Yeah.
and it's unbearable practically. Yeah.
It's almost like I wonder if an element of it is even safety with yourself or certainty with yourself, right? Like we talk about sixes and the need for certainty. Like if I did this, then how can I be certain that I'm trustworthy? How can I even know that I'm safe with myself? So something like that can call into question your own self-safety. And that's real. It is really hard to kind of see yourself out of your ego ideal, right? Our type structure gives us an ego ideal. This is who we think we are or think we should be, because again, it's this protective thing that's developed around us of like, this is my identity. And so when that identity is challenged, it can be like, how am I not what I thought I was, right? And so that kind of moment where you're trying to repair it so you can get back to that ego ideal, or you have the choice to go, all right, I messed up. I am a whole human being that is not always going to, perfectly fit into this like personality ego structure. So it's constantly there for us to do the work. Our personality structures aren't bad. They're just there to kind of one, protect us, but then when we can look at them, it helps us kind of figure out what our life's work is. And I hear you all like really being aware of that, which is kind of the first step. Okay, so we kind of talked about some strengths. We're kind of mixing it up there, but what are some of the challenges or thorns of the type 6 personality
I was
structure?
just kind of laughing because of course we would be mixing it up because we can't not think about the things we're watching out for at the same time.
It was a setup.
Thing reveals type structure.
We're not sure if we can trust Mickey.
It's okay. You can doubt me. It's
So
okay.
fragile. So we're talking about things that are. I mean, maybe that like shit is fragile. I used to always sing the song like, "Please be careful with me. I'm sensitive, and I like to stay that way." And I would get mocked for it, but I'm really like my type 6s take me down, being like, maybe I'm a highly sensitive person. Maybe I don't know. I think my mental health can be very precarious because once especially the pandemic, like the feeling that you're not safe anywhere, safety is an illusion, you can't even breathe with another person, that shit had me all
That's
the way
real.
a mess. Yeah. So you want to talk about downsides, tendency towards anxiety and depression, because I'm always imagining the worst case scenario. So becoming a parent was almost like a nightmare for me because I had such bad postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, because I was fixating on something happening to my kids. And being a 6 did not help me with that. Like, it did not give me a lot of safe harbor from that. So there's my very big spiel about the underbelly of being a 6.
Mm-hmm. I mean, look, Cardi B said, "Be careful with me." Okay, like, don't play with me. And I think that yeah, it can be a really big thing to kind of always be navigating the calculations that can be going on inside of you that other people can't see. They don't know the mental labor that you're putting in and day out.
I wonder if one of the things that was said earlier about small talk and how much that is not liked. And I don't know if this happens for other people, but for me, one way to avoid small talk is to just find a job. So like if you're at a social function, like to go find something to do. And it was quite a while into understanding myself as a 6 that I understood the whole what it meant to go to 3 when you're stressed. And then at some point I read that 3 can really become a workaholic. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is totally the way of right. And I realized like that's what I do. Like, if I don't know how to do anything else, like I'm just going to work and I'm going to take a day off so I can do some other kind of work. Right. And that, I think that's one of the ways of handling some of the things that we don't like small talk and, things that are just socially too challenging. Like you just go find a job. Oh yeah, I'll wash the dishes on the dinner party, or don't ask me to sit and be present in small talk. I'd rather go, whatever the task is that could be done.
Yeah. Thank you, Gaelyn. Yeah.
Anybody relate to that?
Totally.
Which I wonder how many of us that end up burnt out. Maybe burnout is part of that.
I own 3. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Chantelle.
I was going to say that I own 3 businesses, and I had a friend who's also Enneagram 6 be like, but why do you? And I'm like, but because I've been trying to stay busy and just trying to, keep myself preoccupied, and I know how to work. And I finally decided to go on my first, my friend was like, when's the last time you rested? I'm like, I don't know. When I had a kid. They're like, that's not resting. I'm like, so I don't know the last time I stopped. I think I never stopped. I've always had multiple jobs or doing multiple things. Workaholic, right? You could call that. But I decided to take a sabbatical this summer. And I literally said to my therapist, this is the scariest thing I've ever done. And I've come out to like as a Black queer femme. And taking that sabbatical felt like, I cannot believe I'm choosing to do this. This feels so scary. So yeah, I resonate with the thing.
Chantelle, why do you think it was scary?
What am I going to do? Who will I be if I'm not busy working and being useful? And if I'm not useful, then will I be valued? And if I'm not valued, then I'm not safe and I don't belong. So there's a big story behind, if I'm at a party and things are hard for me socially, I'll just make myself useful. And if I'm useful, then I'll be liked. And if I'm liked, then I'll belong. And then if I belong, I'll be safe. That's the sequential, if I give voice to it, Yeah.
Well,
I've definitely experienced that, burning myself out in college and graduate school. But another way I see this showing up too is in my partner relationship, that we were in a lot of crisis from the beginning of our relationship. And it was when the crisis ended that our relationship had problems. And because I realized that, you're Chantelle, I'm like, wait, we don't know how to do this. We don't know how to do normal. I don't know how to be if I don't have we're keeping it together. We're doing this. I'm throwing, we're hanging in there. Now there's this open landscape of us just being us. And that was really hard. That's when we went to marriage counseling, yeah.
Everything is okay. What do we do now?
Right. As long as there was some whack-a-mole to be putting energy towards, I knew how to do that. I was also going to say, and I don't know if this is common, but because I've been mistyped as a 2 a lot of the time because of kind of the warm and the helpful nature. But I know inside it is my managers, kind of managing things, or Chantelle, you're saying this is the way I secure my security is, I'm useful and I get to belong and all of that. And but it's still something that's challenging. It's really hard for me to receive help or to ask for help. That is really hard.
Do you have a sense of why that's hard?
Well, I just think it is more vulnerable than the putting out to do. And for the most part, I haven't experienced it as being a resentment or set up for resentment. I know it could be long term, but it's more just what creates the loneliness, because but I could look oh, I'm always doing for others or connected to others, but because I don't allow it to come back to me, it's like being in a, surrounded by people, but being alone, because I can cultivate relationships, like a lot of connections, but it's how deep am I allowing them to kind of come back in? And it's just that risk, I think, of that vulnerability. Which is just feels weird because I can see other people's needs with compassion, but I can't see my needs with the same compassion. So even like being sick, and I don't know if that also has to be from a head type, but if I like being sick is like, I've had to be working through that the last couple of years because it would put me in the most vulnerable place of not being able to do. Or now my husband says, you start to get 60% better and you start to push yourself to 100% again, which is why you could get sick again. It's because like, I just don't like that vulnerable state of not being well.
Yeah. I mean, that connects because, if it could bring a whole lot of doubt in your body and you're already in your head. So then it's like, oh, now I have to trust my body to sit here and get better. Right. That's like a particularly vulnerable place. And then also, maybe when you're really sick, you can't even do all the research, right? You just like have to trust someone to take care of you, or, there's a lot of places where that kind of tendency towards doubt and needing to prepare can kind of get left behind if you're just at the mercy of people to take care of you or whatever your body can do, or being awake for an hour a day. Like, that's kind of take you out of that headspace where you have to actually say, how am I feeling? Like, where do I feel better? Not logically, it's been 3 days of this illness, I should be better. So it kind of makes sense that it would, trigger some of those, defense mechanisms or just things that have worked for you when you don't have access to them as much. So that fear kind of goes up.
I think you also worry, like, what is that person thinking of me? And as I get older and more secure, that grows less and less important. But it is like, what are they thinking of me? Am I still being trustworthy to them? Are they thinking less of me? Are they thinking I'm not the one to call in a crisis? Like, am I weaker? Or am I still the strong, loyal 6 that they believe me to be? And am I being authentic? I mean, are they changing their opinion of me?
Yeah, which is a lot to carry, especially when you aren't feeling well. Well, this is, I think, a good place to put this, because when we talk about 6s, we often talk about phobic or counterphobic, which may be something you are familiar with. This idea that there are some 6s who, when they feel that fear, they run towards it. That's how they're going to conquer it. And then there are the 6s who, do the opposite. They run from whatever it is and hide or figure out a different strategy than going towards it. We could talk about how all types kind of have this phobic and counterphobic, but 6s are the ones where people love to talk about it. So does anyone have a way they identify or have noticed in themselves, or do you kind of do both? Where does that land for you?
My initial reaction is that I must be phobic, but I know I'm not. I am totally counterphobic. Like, that's going to be hard. I better sign up and do it. Yeah.
And why do you do that?
I think the older I get, the more I become that way.
Okay.
I think it's a shift for me. For me, I think it's because I felt like there were a lot of limitations of things that I couldn't do. And the older I get, the less I'm like, that is not real. Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like if it has to do with me and my relationship to myself or my inner work, like I'm all about that. Like I can face that stuff. I can look at that stuff. Maybe I've grown to get more comfortable with that. But it's still hard, like in relationships. Like the thing that popped up is like, why do I do this thing sometimes where I'm avoiding answering a text message or an email, and then it can slip through the cracks, and I'm creating a situation for myself to then feel guilty about that. And it definitely seems to happen more if I'm feeling overwhelmed in general. But then I get in this weird, like, tangle that I create for myself about, I feel like I can't tell this person yes or tell this person no, or make it fit with the schedule, or just tell them no, I can't, because of what that risks in the relationship, stuff around saying no. And then I can go into the hiding, pulling away.
Zoe, Chantelle, any thoughts on the rushing towards or hiding away?
I would say both. I resonated with Tamara, like what she was saying. It depends on the situation. If it feels overwhelming, I procrastinate and delay making a decision because I don't trust it, or I don't know I'll be able to execute it perfectly. And so I'll just delay. If it has to do with personal work, absolutely, I'll go towards that. So I think it just depends on the authority. Like if I'm the authority, then but if it's something else that I'm unsure of, I'll back away and yeah, cause more stress typically by delaying.
Yeah, I never thought of myself as somebody who avoided conflict. I always rush into I always say when people are conflict avoidant, I'm like conflict. I was like, oh, I'll just take it all on. I'll have the hardest conversations. Yeah. And then I started watching that I don't actually do that all the time. I actually usually get to that point. I weigh the risk always about the relationship capital I can afford to spend on this relationship. And if it's something that I don't care about the relationship, then I'm gonna be conflict. If the more I care about the relationship, the more I want to avoid conflict. And the more precarious things feel for me to just rush in there and be like, I'm gonna take it on. So yeah, I definitely do both. I definitely feel like I grew up super, super, like, let me follow these rules and be perfect and do the right thing. And then in my older years, I was like, fuck it. Like, but I felt like I had to do like a double fingers to everybody that I had to give my loyalty to before. So I just like, yeah, I swing through this pendulum, but now I definitely think I've settled on like, how much relationship capital can I spend here? Do I really care? And then I decide how to be, depending upon the circumstances. And capacity, my own capacity too.
Yeah. And so I wonder if really the key is around if it's relational versus if it's I don't know, situational. And that could also be one of the nuances that we need to tease out more when we talk about this phobic counterphobic thing, or how we deal with fear or whatever, right? Like it actually is different. And maybe also, I think Zoe, you said something about maybe if I'm the authority versus someone else is the authority, right? Maybe that has something to do with whether you go towards it, or, like several of you mentioned the personal work. So if it's something I'm facing because I'm facing myself kind of a thing, that's different. But if it's other people or external factors, I'm going to be different with it, So I don't know, just I'm hearing it kind of be teased out in different ways. So that could even be something that you want to explore more for yourself. Definitely something I'm going to think about more as an Enneagram teacher, because I want to be hearing and thinking about that, and supporting people well, and as they kind of wrestle with that in their own personality type. You guys have given me a lot to think about. I think we type 6s are one of those types that can feel pretty mysterious. Can feel like, okay, how do I, it's a little more difficult to kind of nail down the type often, which is kind of cool. But it's definitely one of those types where I feel like I need to study who you are. And maybe that is because of that, the doubt part, and you reserve yourself. So I think we really have to listen to you all to be able to understand you. So I want to close with one more question. What do people need to know, or how can those of us who are not 6s love type 6 as well. How can we love you well? I'm going to take notes because I want to be able to get this right.
The thing that's on top for me would be like when I hear things, even in the midst of uncertainty or doubt or whatever, chaos, like messages that are like, hey, we got this. We're in it together. You're not alone with this. And I think that's because, I mean, and that could go back into my childhood story too, but there's this sense of being with all those, the committee members, all the voices, looking for all the things, of coming back to like feeling really alone in the midst of that.
Really, that's really lovely. And it feels very doable to just be able to say to somebody, you're not alone in this. I'm with you. They can't necessarily fix it or change the circumstances or the all of the worst case scenarios that could happen, but they can be with you in it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Not giving false assurances. So, like, not saying everything's going to be okay, or there's no reason to worry, or like belittling the things that are that words aren't going to overcome, that kind of, for me, dismiss and then make it where I'm not going to share how I'm feeling. So no false securities. If the situation's really bad, then like Tamara said, we're in this together, not this is okay and it's going to go away. Like, because that's not always the case. So acknowledge that there are reasons to be vigilant at times, instead of downplaying that.
Yeah, I have a very strong reaction to everything's going to be okay, because I feel like that's not always true. We don't know that. I mean, maybe in some giant cosmic sense, sure, but you know, things can get worse before they get better. And so I can deeply resonate with that. I think it can come from a good place.
Oh, sure.
But you know, communicating with people in a way that isn't dismissive, because it sounds like, you know, you have received that as dismissive when somebody says, oh, everything's gonna be fine, or you don't need to worry, because yeah, that may not be the reality for you.
Right.
It's so nice to feel normal.
For real. That's one of the beauties of the Enneagram.
Yeah. I just feel normal, for the love of God, because I get a lot of, I feel like when my hypervigilance has paid off to avoid something or allowed me to have the thing that we needed, people are grateful. But when people feel like my hypervigilance or my concern is impeding, causing them more work or impeding on their sense of needing to be in denial, then I'm a problem, you know, and then they want me just to be quiet. And they don't read my concern as my desire to keep everybody safe because I care. They read it as perfectionism, overbearing, just a negative person. I'm one of the most positive, warm people out here. And, okay. So I think just like, don't appreciate me only when it's convenient to you or when it's not that costly for you. Appreciate me in my fullness, even when it means that you have to go that extra step. Even it means when we have to slow down and not go as fast as you wanted to. Even it means you have to tell me that you love me for the 10,000th time. Like, just appreciate it, because other times me asking those questions save us unnecessary pain and suffering. So yeah, I don't know how you encapsulate that into a thing, but just do that. Do what I just said. Yeah.
Well, I got from that, appreciate me in my fullness. And don't know. I'm trying to think what the second part really is, but because that's about like appreciate me in my fullness, even when I'm, because sometimes, like you said, that hypervigilance is helpful. Like it did help us avoid a thing. So, like, respect the skill set. I'm not exactly sure. Like we can make it all mystical and fancy and be like my intuition, because maybe some of it is intuition. So I don't know. I think that people often can be drawn to you because you do the worrying for everybody. So maybe it's something about like being able to appreciate that part of you as well as the warmth and the, what all the other stuff we talked about. Zoie, did you have?
I just, I felt all three of those so deeply. I mean, that I was going to say support is like my favorite word. If I trust you enough that you can support me, again, it's that contradiction. But when you're on my team, to know I can count on you, and I'm not operating alone with the managers and all of that, and I have someone to debrief and download and bounce ideas off of. In the non-spiritual sense, my soul can rest, I guess. So it's just the day-to-day just becomes just easier. And then again, the false assurances, absolutely. I mean, telling me not to worry and pithy sayings make me not trust you. So that also spoke to me. So yeah, all of these were just like a warm hug to hear.
Thank you. Well, that's pretty much it. Is there anything that you want to add before we close, about anything about your experience of being in type 6?
I would just name, like, because it's been one of the bigger pieces of growth just in the most recent years, is getting over my own shame of having anxiety and being able to start just voicing that has made such a difference in my experience of the world, but also then in relationship, primarily with my partner. Like just the simplicity of like saying, I'm feeling anxious right now. I mean, it sounds so simple to do, but it's been huge to be able to do that, because I think sometimes maybe part of the inner makeup is like, I should already have that taken care of. It shouldn't have to come out here, So
Yeah.
I start to experience my own anxiety as failure, like that I haven't been able to fix that yet, versus leaning into the vulnerability of it, right?
Which I think is like the moving towards the 9 and strength, right?
Right.
So we're at peace because we're, allowing that to come up, and instead of moving into task mode or whatever to deal with it, we're finding our peace that way.
Finding the peace in the vulnerability. Is that what you said? Or something else?
Just coming to terms with our anxiety is not a failure, but having a way to, the picture that's coming to my mind is like loosening the cap on a soda, and all that carbonation is just like, I have a place to go and I'm feeling this, and I have a place to move more towards peace, which is sharing that with the trusted partner or whoever.
Yeah. Thank you for that image. Yeah, that's really powerful. Any other thoughts?
It seems like in several ways and some of it, the actual words were no pithy sayings and no small talk. And yet the other side of that is, let me trust you and let's go deep.
Yeah.
I just need to come to this committee for things I want to tattoo on my body. It's all of our catchphrases, all the catchphrases that we just said, let's just get them together for an Enneagram 6 tattoo list. And what was the last one?
No small talk.
That's right. No, but be trustworthy and let's go deep. I mean, we could pick you some bumper stickers, people. This is it. This is it. Now you know. Yeah, this is great.
I'm writing that down. Be trustworthy and let's go deep. Which, you know, is interesting too, because that probably rubs against other people, other types, right? Like we're always kind of navigating our own stuff internally and people are navigating their stuff internally and we're coming together. So, but yeah, being able to realize that there are people out there that want to go deep right away. And that's something that you are really kind of geared towards in your type structure. So, well, thank you so much, you all, for your time.
Thank you.